They brought her to Briarwood Plantation on a night when the moon was so thin it looked like a scratch across the sky. A wagon creaked through the front gate, pulled by a trembling mule, the overseer sitting stiff as a corpse beside the driver. Even from the big house veranda, the slaves could feel something wrong in the air, heavy, pressing. Like the night itself was holding its breath. In the back of the wagon sat a woman. Her wrists were bruised from rope, her dress torn, her hair matted with dirt and dried sweat. She looked young, maybe 22, but her eyes carried something older, something that didn't belong to a person her age. They were pale, almost silver, like moonlit water. No slave on Briarwood had ever seen eyes like that. When the overseer dragged her down. She didn't resist. She didn't speak. She didn't even look frightened. She just stood there, still, too still. Miss Eleanor Briar, the master's wife, stepped onto the porch, lantern held high. She was a sharp woman, the kind whose eyes missed nothing. She examined the silent figure before her. "What is her name?" she asked. The overseer cleared his throat, uncomfortable. "We don't know, ma'am. She won't say it. Won't. Or can't." Eleanor pressed. The woman lifted her head slowly, and for the briefest second, Eleanor saw something impossible flicker in her expression. Recognition? Familiarity? As if the woman knew this house. This porch. This place. But she had never been here. Eleanor stepped closer, lifting the lantern until its glow touched the woman's face. "You will answer to someone," she said. "If not your given name, then a new one." The woman finally spoke. Her voice was soft, cracked from days without water, but steady. "I have a name," she said. "Then speak it." The woman's silver eyes drifted toward the window on the second floor of the house. A room long sealed. A room that no one entered. A room that had belonged to Eleanor's daughter, the daughter who had died 3 years ago. The woman whispered, "My name." "Is Lily?" Silence collapsed over the yard. Eleanor. Briar's lantern nearly slipped from her hand, because Lily was the name of her dead daughter. The name no outsider could possibly know. The name she had forbidden the household to speak aloud since the day the child was buried. The overseer muttered, "She's lying, ma'am?" "Trying to unsettle you." But Eleanor couldn't tear her eyes away from the woman, because the woman wasn't smiling, wasn't mocking, wasn't afraid. She simply stood there, with the quiet certainty of someone speaking the truth. Eleanor whispered, barely audible, "Why did you say that name?" The woman looked up at the house again, at the window of the sealed room, where a child once sat during long afternoons of sickness. Drawing pictures of birds she dreamed of seeing. And the woman said, with a trembling breath, "Because you used to call me that." A cold wave washed over Eleanor. Something ancient and heavy stirred in the dark around them. The overseer took a step back. "Ma'am, what's wrong with her?" Eleanor swallowed hard, because she finally remembered something. The pale silver eyes, the exact color of her daughter's. No slave had eyes like that. No living soul did. Eleanor's voice broke as she whispered, "Take her to the quarters. Lock her in the unused cabin, and don't let her speak to anyone." The overseer grabbed the woman's arm. But before he pulled her away, she looked at Eleanor directly, deeply, and said, "You buried me, Miss Eleanor, but I didn't stay." Eleanor staggered backward, lantern trembling uncontrollably, because in the cemetery behind the house, beneath the old willow tree, lay a small gravestone. Lily Briar, born 1841, died 1847 or EST. With the angels in. Now a grown woman, an enslaved woman, stood on her porch wearing her daughter's voice. They dragged the woman, Lily, as she called herself, across the yard toward the old storage cabin behind the slave quarters. No one had lived in that cabin for years. Some said it was because the roof leaked. Others whispered that the real reason was what happened inside it long ago after Lily Briar, the master's daughter, took her last breath. But the overseer didn't believe in whispers or curses. He shoved the woman inside, tied the rope across the door latch, and muttered, "You stay quiet in there, you hear?" Quiet. But the woman didn't answer. She sat down on the dusty floor, hands resting gently in her lap, as if she had come home, Outside, the workers gathered in small clusters, exchanging fearful glances. They had seen strange things on plantations before, shadows moving where no person stood. Footsteps in hallways locked for decades, whispers in the rice fields before dawn. But this was different. A living woman stepping onto the estate with the name and eyes of a child long dead? That was the kind of thing that made even the boldest men shiver. Old Miriam, the midwife, crept closest to the cabin. She was the oldest slave on Briarwood, and the only one who had tended to Miss Eleanor's daughter in her final days. She pressed her ear to the wooden wall. Inside, she heard the woman breathing slowly, as calm as a sleeping child. But there was something else, too. Another sound. A faint humming. A lullaby. One Miriam hadn't heard in years. Her heart nearly stopped. Thought it was the song Eleanor used to sing to Lily every night. Miriam backed away, whispering under her breath, "Lord, protect us." Inside the big house, Eleanor paced the parlor, hands trembling so violently she could barely hold her teacup. Her husband was away on business in Baton Rouge. No one else in the house knew Lily the way she had. No one had seen the child's final weeks, how the fever twisted her small body, how she begged her mother not to leave her alone in the dark. Eleanor had sworn she would never speak her daughter's name again because the guilt was too heavy. But now a grown woman stood on her porch, claiming to be the child she buried. Eleanor pressed a hand against her chest. Her daughter had been fair-skinned, fragile, barely able to walk in the last months. Yet the woman outside was tall, strong, her skin a deep, rich brown, her build entirely different. Nothing about her matched the child Eleanor remembered. Sepia eyes. Those impossible silver eyes. The same eyes Eleanor saw every time she tried to sleep. The same eyes she avoided whenever she passed the portrait in the upstairs hallway. Eleanor whispered to herself, "This is madness." Madness? But the truth scratched at her thoughts like fingernails on wood. The fever had changed her daughter in those final days. Her voice had deepened strangely. She had spoken names no one had taught her. And the last thing Lily had ever whispered, right before the final breath left her, "Mama, don't let me stay in the dark." Eleanor squeezed her eyes shut. She could still feel Lily's cold little hand in hers, and now that same voice older, cracked. Change by time had returned. Night fell heavy over Briarwood. The quarters went silent as the moon rose, pale light slipping through gaps in the cabin walls. Inside, the woman's silver eyes glowed faintly in the darkness. She sat facing the far wall, tracing her fingers gently across a splintered plank where something years ago had dug small grooves into the wood, child-sized. Grooves dot tiny desperate scratches. She whispered, "This is where you locked me, isn't it?" The wind outside hissed against the eaves, carrying with it the distant cry of a whippoorwill. The trees rustled as though something moved through them, something small. Restless, searching, the woman placed her palm against the scratch marks. "I remember this place," she said softly. "And someone else remembers me." Behind her, in the corner of the cabin, the shadows stirred not with movement, but with the faint suggestion of a child's shape, barely formed, barely there. But watching her with the same glowing pale eyes, the woman didn't turn. She didn't flinch. She only whispered, "I came back like you asked." Outside, Miriam, still awake and listening, gasped and clutched her chest, because she heard the reply, a child's whisper, thin, trembling, impossible, "Mama, don't leave me." Miriam stumbled backward from the cabin door, clutching her shawl around her trembling shoulders. The night air felt colder, heavier, as if something unseen had slipped through it. She had delivered dozens of babies on Briarwood in her lifetime, had washed countless bodies before burial, but never, not once, had she heard a dead child speak. She hurried toward the main house, her old feet dragging through the dirt, whispering prayers she hadn't spoken since her own children died. "Lord, shield us. Lord, shield us." But deep down, she feared the Lord had stepped away from Briarwood long ago. Inside the cabin, the woman stayed kneeling before the scratched wooden plank, her breath steady, almost serene. She pressed her forehead to the wall as though listening for something no one else could hear. Outside, moonlight poured through the gaps, forming pale lines across her skin. The shadows in the corner, where the faint outline of a child had appeared, quivered, like a candle flame fighting to stay alive. The woman's lips parted. "I am here now," she whispered. "You don't have to be afraid anymore." The cabin answered with silence at first. Then the air changed. A cold draft blew across the floor, swirling dust into tight spirals. The boards under her knees creaked not with weight, but with memory. The woman stiffened. She lifted her head slowly, turning toward the farthest corner of the room. The outline of the child sharpened, taking on the faintest shape of small shoulders, frail arms, a thin neck. The pale eyes glowed like two small moons. Then the voice came again, fragile, breathy, echoing as if spoken from deep underground. "You left me." The woman's chest tightened. "No," she whispered. "I didn't." The child's shadow flinched. "You left me." The woman closed her eyes, steadying herself. "It wasn't me. I didn't have a choice." The temperature dropped sharply. Frost crept across the edges of the plank she knelt beside. A whispering wind rattled the shutters, though no breeze touched the trees outside. The shadow child took a half step forward, or something like a step, and the woman saw it clearly for the first time. The outline wasn't of a little girl. It was of a little girl curled in fear, arms hugged tightly around her legs. Just as she must have been the night she died, the woman felt tears sting her eyes. "You were alone." "I know." The child's whisper rose into a trembling cry. "It was dark, Mama. It was dark." The woman's hands shook violently. Silver eyes glistened with a sorrow too deep for words. She reached toward the shadow. Not touching, just close enough that the air between them seemed to shiver. "I'm not your mother," she whispered. The shadow recoiled, sharply, like a wounded animal. The cabin boards groaned. "No." The whisper hissed, layered now half child, half something older, darker. The woman steadied herself and continued softly. "Not your mother. But something of her remembered you and me." The cry stopped. The shadow froze. The woman pressed her palm to her own chest. "Your mother loved you." She wasn't ready to face what happened, Dot, so you held on to her. You held on to her voice, her fear. The woman lowered her hand, and somehow you found your way into me. A long silence followed. The kind that feels like the whole world is holding its breath. Then the shadow child tilted its head, pale eyes blinking slowly. The voice that came next was soft or broken, like it was groping through a memory of life it barely understood. "Are you..." "Me?" The woman's heart cracked. She reached forward again, tears falling freely now. "No," she said. "I'm not you. I'm not Lily, but something inside me." "Remembers her?" The shadow flickered, softened, dimmed to a quieter shape. Then the child asked the question that froze the woman's blood. "Then where's the part of me that never left?" A chill swept through the cabin. The woman swallowed hard, because she knew exactly where that part lingered. Not here, not in this room, not in her. It was in the big house, behind a locked door. In the room that Eleanor Briar had sealed the day her child died. The woman stood slowly, her shadow stretching across the cabin floor. Her silver eyes hardened with purpose. "I know where you are," she whispered to the child's fading silhouette. "I'm coming to find you." As she reached for the cabin door, the wind outside shifted, carrying with it the faintest trace of something small, something barefoot, running across floorboards that had not felt footsteps in years. The woman pushed open the cabin door, just as dawn began to spread a thin gray light across Briarwood. The yard was still quiet, the slaves not yet awake, the house servants not yet bustling. Only the cicadas whispered, their tired hum blending with the soft rustle of moss in the wind. She stepped out barefoot onto the cool earth, her eyes fixed on the main house with an expression that was neither fear nor hesitation, only recognition. As if she had walked that path many times before. In a life she could not name, Miriam spotted her from a distance and nearly cried out. The old midwife rushed forward with surprising speed, grabbing the woman's wrist. Child, no. She whispered urgently. You can't go up there. Miss Eleanor ain't in her right mind these days. If she sees you walking toward that house after last night, she'll think you a demon come to finish her. But the woman didn't pull away. She simply laid her free hand gently over Miriam's trembling fingers. I have to, she said softly. She locked the room, but something inside it didn't stay locked. Miriam's breath stuttered. Don't say such things. The dead need rest. They don't want us prying at their pain. The woman's silver eyes flickered, reflecting the rising sun like polished metal. She wasn't given rest. Miriam let go of her wrist then, not out of consent, but because her hand had gone numb. She watched helplessly as the woman walked toward the big house, her step steady. Her posture strangely familiar, like someone Eleanor Briar had once cradled on her lap. As the woman approached the veranda. The front door burst open. Eleanor stood framed in the doorway, her nightgown still on, her hair disheveled, her eyes red from a sleepless night. She clutched a book to her chest, a small leather journal with a broken clasp. Her daughter's journal. Something she had not touched since the burial. When she saw the woman approaching, Eleanor's face went pale. White as bone. No. She whispered, stumbling backward. No, you can't be here. You can't come into this house. The woman stopped at the bottom step, tilting her head slightly, as though measuring Eleanor's fear. You used to carry me up these stairs, she said softly. Always on your hip. Always humming. Eleanor trembled. You are not my child. The woman tilted her head again. No, I'm not. Eleanor steadied herself with one hand on the doorframe, breathing in sharp, ragged gasps. And why? Why do you speak with her voice? The woman gently touched her own throat. Because when someone dies in fear, she whispered, their voice doesn't always follow them. It stays behind. In walls, in bedsheets, in the hearts of those who loved them. She took a breath, eyes softening. Your daughter's voice found me? Eleanor's face crumpled. She clutched the journal tighter. She was only 6. Eleanor's words broke. She was so scared the night she died. She begged me not to leave her alone. She begged. The woman stepped onto the first stair. Something in the air shifted. The wind stilled. The cicadas stopped. And the house itself seemed to lean forward. Take me to her room, the woman said. Eleanor shook her head violently. No, that room is sealed. Nothing enters there. Nothing leaves. The woman looked up toward the window of the second floor, the window that remained shuttered year-round, the one that no servant dared clean, the one every child refused to play beneath. The shutters rattled softly at first, then harder, as if tiny hands were banging from the inside. Eleanor gasped. Her legs weakening beneath her. Not again. Not again. The woman reached the top step and placed her hand over Eleanor's, which still gripped the doorframe. It's time, she whispered gently. She's been calling for you. The shutters upstairs burst open with a violent crash, slamming against the wall. A cold gust swept down the staircase, cold enough that Eleanor's breath fogged the air. Sound drifted with it. Not a scream, not a wail, a small broken whisper. Mama. The dark is back. The journal slipped from Eleanor's fingers and fell to the wooden floor with a soft thud. The woman stepped across the threshold and said in a voice that echoed through the silent house, Take me to where she died. Eleanor closed her eyes. And for the first time in 3 years, she walked toward the locked room at the end of the hall. The hallway felt impossibly long as Eleanor and the woman ascended the staircase. Each step groaned beneath them, echoing like a warning from the bones of the house itself. Eleanor clutched the banister with a shaking hand, breathing in shallow, uneven gulps. The woman followed closely behind her, calm but alert, her silver eyes fixed on the end of the hallway, on the door she had never seen, yet somehow already remembered. To the servants below. The house looked frozen, as if time itself refused to follow them up those stairs. Miriam watched from the bottom with tears in her eyes. Don't go in there, she whispered to no one. Some rooms stay locked for a reason. But they went. Eleanor paused before the last door, hands trembling so violently she could barely fit the key into the lock. The door was old, its paint cracked and peeling, its handle rusted with disuse. But what chilled her more were the faint indentations along the frame, tiny scratches from small, desperate hands. Eleanor touched them with the tips of her fingers, her breath catching. "She made these," she whispered, "the night before she died. I thought she was confused. I told her the dark couldn't hurt her. I told her—" Her voice broke completely. Behind her, the woman spoke gently. She wasn't afraid of the dark. She was afraid of being alone in it. Eleanor's eyes brimmed with tears. She turned the key. The lock gave way with a soft metallic click, a sound so fragile it felt like a memory cracking open. The door swung inward. The smell hit them first, cold, still, like air that had been untouched for years. The room was exactly as Eleanor had left it the morning after the burial. The small iron bed with its faded blue quilt, the child's chair in the corner, a single doll with missing button eyes lying face down on the floor. Everything coated in a thin layer of dust, so delicate it looked like frost. But the cold wasn't coming from the room itself. It was coming from the far corner, the same corner where, in the cabin the night before, the shadow of a child had crouched. The air there shimmered faintly, as though something unseen stood waiting, breath held tight. The woman took one step inside. The temperature dropped instantly. Eleanor's breath fogged white. The lamp flame flickered violently. She whispered, "Lily?" Her voice cracked on the name she had avoided for 3 years. The air in the corner stirred slowly at first, then with the faint sound of fabric rustling across sheets. A shape began forming, not fully visible, but unmistakably small, child-sized, curled into itself. The woman moved toward it. Eleanor instinctively grabbed her arm. "No, don't go near it." But the woman didn't stop. "She knows me," she said quietly. "But she needs you." Eleanor shook her head wildly. "She died in this room." She died screaming. The woman turned to her with a gaze so steady, so heartbreakingly gentle, that Eleanor fell silent. "She didn't die screaming," the woman whispered. "She was calling for you." Eleanor staggered as if struck. Her knees buckled as she sank onto the child's little bed, a sob escaping her lips. "I couldn't watch her go. I was too afraid." The shadow in the corner shifted. A faint glow pale and trembling rose from the floorboards. The child's voice whispered, "Mama, you left me?" Eleanor cried out, covering her mouth, her whole body racked with grief. I know, baby, I'm sorry. I should have stayed. I should have held you." The woman crouched in front of the shimmering presence, her voice breaking. "She doesn't want your apology. She wants you to take her out of the dark." Eleanor's tears fell silently. I can't hold her. She's not. The woman took Eleanor's trembling hands in hers. "She can't leave until you do the thing you were too afraid to do 3 years ago." Eleanor blinked through a haze of tears. What thing?" The woman turned toward the shadow child. Her silver eyes softened. "She needs you to open the window." The room pulsed one soft breath, and the shutters rattled faintly, like small fingers tapping from the inside of a coffin. Eleanor stared at the window. The last time she had opened it, her daughter had been alive. Hands shaking uncontrollably, she rose from the bed. The woman stayed by her side, steady as a guide. Together they walked to the window. The shadow in the corner lifted its head. Hope flickered in its pale eyes. Eleanor touched the window latch with trembling fingers, then froze as the room filled with a child's whisper. "Mama." "Please?" The lock gave way. The window creaked open, and the darkness in the room began to breathe. The moment Eleanor pushed the window open, a violent gust of air burst into the room, whipping the curtains into spiraling shapes and scattering dust across the wooden floor, like ash from a long-dead fire. The cold that had clung to the walls rushed outward, escaping into the dawn light as though something trapped for years had finally found a way out. Eleanor staggered back, gripping the window frame with white knuckles as her breath came in sharp, panicked bursts. The woman stood still beside her, silver eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. Her hair lifting in the sudden wind like strands reaching toward the sky. But the cold didn't leave all at once. Dot in the far corner. The shadow child Lily's lost voice shifted uneasily, its small shape trembling like a candle flame in a storm. The woman knelt slowly, her hands steady despite the freezing air now swirling around her ankles. "It's all right," she whispered. "You don't have to hide anymore. The dark isn't closed around you now." The shadow lifted its head, its pale eyes glowing with the fragile innocence of a child who had been afraid for too long. Yet there was something else in those eyes, something guarded, because not all that lingered and the room was helpless. Something else had grown here too. Something that fed on loneliness, on fear, on the nights when Lily cried unseen and unheard, Dot as the wind poured out the window. The room began to creak, walls shuddering, floorboards groaning under invisible pressure. Eleanor stepped backward until she hit the doorframe. "What's happening?" she cried. "I opened the window. Why isn't she leaving?" The woman didn't answer at first. Her gaze remained fixed on the corner where Lily's form flickered in and out of visibility. The child's silhouette curled tighter, then abruptly stretched, warping, shifting as a darker bulk pulled itself from behind her small frame, like a shadow peeling off another shadow. Eleanor gasped. What is that?" The woman rose slowly, her expression hardening. "That darkness wasn't hers," she said. "She lived with it, but it didn't belong to her." The larger shape moved, spreading across the wall like oil in water. It carried no face, no forlorn weight, heavy, suffocating, malicious. It pulsed as though breathing, stretching its limbs toward the ceiling and then toward the woman. Eleanor let out a choked cry. "Get away from it." But the woman didn't move. She stood tall, staring the shape down with a strange sorrow. "This is what fear becomes," she whispered. "Left too long, fed too deeply. It turns into something alive." The darkness recoiled, then lunged out. It swept across the room in an instant. A wave of cold so intense the breath was knocked from Eleanor's lungs. The woman staggered back, arms braced. The shadow slammed into the walls, rattling the shutters, and for a moment, the entire room felt like it might collapse. But then a sound cut through the chaos. A small, trembling sob. A child's voice. Lily's voice. "Mama, don't let it take me." Eleanor screamed, stumbling toward the corner despite the woman reaching out to stop her. "I'm here," she cried. "Baby, I'm here now. Mama's here." She fell to her knees, reaching toward the child's flickering form. Hands passing through cold air and thin shadow. The darkness froze Dot, and for the first time, it hesitated. The woman stepped forward, placing herself between Eleanor and the larger shadow, her voice low but unshakably firm. "She isn't alone anymore," she said. "Fear dies when it's seen." The shadow flinched, shrinking back to the corner where it had grown for years in silence. Lily's small figure lifted her head, eyes glowing softly, no longer trembling. The woman extended her hand. "Come with me," she told the child's shape. "Not into the dark. Into the light." For a moment, nothing moved. Then Lily's shadow reached out one small hand, faint as smoke, and touched the woman's fingers. Instantly, the darkness shrieked that it pulled itself upward, stretching across the ceiling like a storm cloud ready to swallow the room whole. The window rattled violently. Eleanor covered her head as the house groaned under the force, but the woman didn't let go of Lily's hand. She pulled her gently toward the open window. "We're leaving this place," she whispered. "Both of us." And with the first ray of morning sun peeking over the horizon, the shadow child stepped forward, and the darkness behind her. Dot not in anger, Dot in fear, Dot it began to unravel. Slowly at first, Dot, then all at once. Shrinking away from the light, collapsing into itself, dissolving like ink in water, until only a faint stain remained on the floorboards. The child's small voice whispered, "Mama, I'm not scared anymore." Eleanor sobbed into her hands, The woman lifted Lily's fading silhouette in her arms weightless as breath, and carried her toward the open window. The child's outline brightening in the sunlight then dashed Lily dissolved into light, a soft glow, a sigh. A warmth passing through the room like the brush of tiny fingers across. Eleanor's she was gone. Finally free. The woman sank to her knees. Exhausted, trembling, her silver eyes dimming. Behind her, Eleanor whispered, voice cracking open. Who are you? The woman looked up with a tired, gentle smile. I'm the second chance she didn't get. For a long moment after Lily's spirit dissolved into the morning light. The room remained still, so still that Eleanor could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Dust floated gently through the air like drifting snow, catching the new day's sunlight. The shuttered room, once suffocating with darkness and grief, felt open for the first time in years. Eleanor pressed a hand to her chest, as if afraid that the slightest movement might undo what had just happened. She stared at the woman kneeling on the floor, this stranger with her daughter's voice, her daughter's memories, her daughter's fear woven into her skin. The woman's silver eyes glimmered faintly as she wiped her brow with a trembling hand. Sweat and tears mixed on her cheeks, and exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. She looked fragile human, but something in her presence made the room feel steadier, safer. Eleanor approached slowly, her footsteps careful on the creaking floorboards. Did it hurt her? She finally asked, her voice soft as a broken reed. The woman lifted her head. No, she whispered. The pain wasn't in the leaving. It was in the staying. She touched the floor where the dark stain had been, the place where the fear had lived and fed on Lily's isolation. Her fingertips brushed the boards gently, almost tenderly, as though comforting the memory of a child who had suffered too long. She shouldn't have been alone in her last moments. That's what kept her here. Eleanor sank onto the edge of the bed, her body heavy with years of guilt. She called for me, she murmured. I heard her, but I told myself it was the fever speaking, that she wouldn't know if I stepped away for a moment. Her voice cracked. But she did know, and she never stopped knowing. The woman nodded softly, not with judgment, but with understanding. A mother's fear can echo louder than a child's cry, she said. You were grieving before she even left you. Eleanor sobbed quietly into her hands. The woman watched her, feeling an ache in her own chest that wasn't entirely her own. Lily's fear had entwined with the woman's body the way vines claim a tree, wrapping around her voice, her dreams, her memories until neither belonged fully to one or the other. She remembered flashes, shapes, feelings, places she'd never seen. Being shut in darkness, calling, waiting, hearing footsteps that never came. And she remembered waking one day in a body that wasn't a child's, in a life that wasn't Lily's. She had walked through the world with someone else's longing, stitched into her bones. I don't know why she chose me, the woman whispered. I don't know how she found me. All I knew was that something inside me was unfinished, something that wasn't mine. She stared at the window, now open and filled with morning warmth. When I reached Briarwood, everything felt familiar and wrong at the same time, like walking into a dream you don't remember dreaming. Eleanor wiped her tears, watching the woman closely. What happens now? She asked. Now that she's gone? The woman hesitated. That was the question she had avoided, the one that gnawed at her from the moment she set foot on the plantation. When Lily's soul had clung to her, she'd been two people tangled together. Now, she was only herself again. Whoever that truly was. I don't know, she admitted. But I feel lighter. Her hands trembled slightly. And emptier. Eleanor reached forward suddenly, surprising herself, and took the woman's hands in hers. You helped her, she said firmly, her voice gaining steadiness for the first time. You freed her? I couldn't do it. I wouldn't have known how. But you... She exhaled shakily. You're not done here. The woman blinked. What do you mean? Eleanor's voice softened. There's more than one kind of haunting, child. Some hauntings cling to walls. Others live inside hearts. She touched her own chest. And some Stay in the memories of those left behind. As if on cue, a soft breeze drifted through the window, warm and fragrant with the scent of the blooming magnolia tree outside. The oppressive cold that had once seeped from the corners was gone. In its place was something gentle, something almost hopeful. The woman looked around. The room felt peaceful, quiet, but not empty. She stood slowly, steadying herself on the bedpost. "What about the dark?" she asked. "Will it come back?" Eleanor shook her head. "Fear stays only when there's no one to face it." She placed a gentle hand on the woman's cheek. "You faced it." The woman closed her eyes. For the first time since she could remember, she felt a growing stillness in her mind, no whispers, no child's cry echoing through her dreams, no shadows pulling at her spirit, just silence. Beautiful, healing silence. Eleanor whispered, "You don't have to be Lily anymore." "You never had to be." The woman opened her eyes slowly. Her silver gaze was no longer haunted. "I don't know who I am," she said softly. Eleanor gave a faint, trembling smile. "Then let us find out together." The woman took one last look at the room, the place of death, fear, and now release. She stepped toward the door, each footstep steady, purposeful. As she crossed the threshold, a warm gust curled gently through the room behind her. Lifting the curtain one last time, a childlike sigh drifted through the air, peaceful, grateful. Then the house fell silent. The woman paused at the top of the stairs, placing a hand over her heart. She wasn't alone anymore, but Lily was finally gone, and that was enough, thought the morning after Lily's spirit faded into the warm light. The entire plantation felt different, lighter, as if someone had opened every window after years of suffocating darkness. Briarwood, once a place where shadows clung to the walls like old wounds, seemed to exhale for the first time. The birds sang again near the magnolia tree. The breeze carried a softness the house had forgotten. Even the floorboards groaned less, as if relieved of a weight that had pressed down on them for decades. But the woman, the one who had carried Lily's memories inside her, did not feel free. Not yet. She followed Eleanor downstairs, her steps unsteady, but purposeful. Something inside her chest felt reshaped, still tender, as though her heart were learning how to beat on its own again without another soul clinging to it. She paused halfway down the stairs, gripping the railing. For so long she had been divided herself and not herself. Now there was only one voice in her mind, one heartbeat echoing inside her ribs. Eleanor noticed her hesitating and turned back. "You don't have to be afraid," she said gently. "Fear doesn't live here anymore." But the woman wasn't afraid of the house. She was afraid of herself. Downstairs, the parlor was filled with framed paintings, family portraits from decades past. Eleanor stopped in front of one, a small portrait of Lily at age, smiling shyly with flowers in her hair. The woman looked at the painting and felt the ghost of familiarity tug at her chest, a faint ache where Lily's memories once lived. But this time, it wasn't possession. It wasn't a haunting. It was simply remembrance. "She was kind," the woman murmured, "even in the darkness." Eleanor nodded, her voice trembling. "She was the best thing I ever had." They stood in silence for a long moment, breathing in the weight of everything that had been lost and everything that had finally been released. Then Eleanor turned to her. "I never asked your name," she said softly. The woman lowered her eyes. "I don't know." She swallowed. "I've forgotten." Eleanor reached out, taking her hands with unexpected warmth. "Then choose one," she whispered. "Let it be yours." "Not hers, yours." The woman blinked, startled by the simplicity of it. She had spent years feeling like a vessel, a borrowed body for a lost child. But now she had the chance to be someone real, someone whole. She stepped away from the portraits and walked toward the window. The magnolia tree outside swayed in the morning breeze, its blossoms bright against the sun. She watched the petals tremble and fall, soft white flakes landing quietly on the ground. Each petal drifted down like a memory being released. "Clara," she whispered finally. Her voice felt different, fuller, steadier. "My name is Clara." Eleanor smiled through tears. It suits you. For the first time, Clara felt something bloom in her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. A fragile hope. Eleanor placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. You can stay here if you want. This house needs people who can face the dark. She paused. And so do I. Clara looked around at the old wooden beams, the dusty shelves, the once ominous corners now washed in morning light. Briarwood had been a prison for Lily. It had nearly become a tomb for Clara's identity. But now, it was simply a house wounded by time and grief. Trying to heal, Clara shook her head gently. No, she said. I don't think I'm meant to stay. Where will you go? Eleanor asked, her voice thick with concern. Clara exhaled, feeling the answer rise slowly, like light through fog. Anywhere, she said. Somewhere that has no memories of me. Or of her. She touched her chest lightly. I want to know who I am without the echoes. Eleanor began to cry, not from sadness, but from the relief of understanding. She embraced Clara tightly, warm, human, real. Then go, she whispered, and live for both of you. Clara stepped out onto the porch, the sunlight falling across her face like a blessing. She felt the breeze move through her hair, lifting it gently. She closed her eyes and let the warmth soak into her skin. For the first time, she felt entirely her own dot behind her. Briarwood no longer loomed. It simply stood quiet, still, and at peace. Clara walked down the path toward the road, the magnolia petals scattering beneath her feet. As she reached the gate, she hesitated and looked back. She didn't see a ghost. She didn't feel a presence. She didn't hear a whisper, only the magnolia tree swaying gently. As if waving goodbye, Clara smiled. Brave smile, and turned away. The road stretched into the horizon, open, endless, a path for a woman newly reborn. Behind her, the house finally slept. Ahead of her, life finally waited. And somewhere in the quiet between them, Lily's last echo faded softly into peace. Clara did not disappear. She lived. She became whole. And for the first time, she belonged to herself.